Good morning. Today is the 19th day of Tevet, the 31st day of December, the last day of the civil year. And
muted, Rabbi.
You can't hear me? Oh, sorry. And it's seems like it aligned very nicely. That we're finishing the book of Genesis, starting the book of Exodus, and we're also finishing the year 2023 and starting 2024. So, we'll hear with the recording, but I hope it somehow pulls through. What we want to look at is a very well-known medrash, a homiletic explanation of what kept the Israelites, what helped them survive in the Egyptian exile. And so they came down, all of them, and they were there for 210 years. It's not a short amount of time, but you have to remember that they didn't have the Torah yet. What they had from the Torah was the stories of the patriarchs, which later, in Parashat Mishpatim, in 5 weeks, we'll see that Moses takes what's called the Book of the Covenant. The Book of the Covenant is the early version of the Book of Genesis, and he rewrites it, he edits it the way that God tells him to. And that's basically what they had. And that wasn't very much to go on to retain their identity. So the sages are keenly interested in what exactly helped them retain their identity as Hebrews, as different from the Egyptians. And they note that there are 4 things. They write like this. They did not change their names. They say Reuven and Shimon came down and Reuven and Shimon came out. So their names remained. They did not change their language. They continued to speak in Hebrew, the language of the land of Canaan, which the Egyptians did not know because it was a Semitic language, and the Egyptians are from the offspring of Ham. They also barred themselves from speaking evil about one another, meaning they stayed together and they didn't think ill of one another. And the last one is they barred themselves from improper sexual conduct. So the sages focus on these 4 things. Now, when you think about these 4 things, what they're really saying is these are 4 ingredients that even if you don't yet have Torah, they will keep you separate and distinct and with your own identity. So the way that usually Rav Ginsburg likes to analyze things like this is if you have 4 reasons, then the 4 reasons can be corresponded to the 4 letters of God's name. They could also be corresponded in other ways, and as we'll see. But the 4 letters of God's name is the basis, and they're actually in order. That wisdom, the letter Yud, the first letter of God's name, is that they didn't change their names. The Hey, the first Hey of God's name, is that they didn't change their language. This should come not as a big surprise because we've talked many times about wisdom and understanding as being the 2 hemispheres of the brain, and the left hemisphere being the one that's related to language. So here we see it again, that we're corresponding language to Hey, to the letter Hey, which is the sphere of understanding. So again, just to get things straight again, it's Yud, Hey, Vav, and Hey. These 4 letters, they correspond to wisdom, understanding, beauty, and kingdom. Or in Hebrew, Chokhmah, Binah, Tiferet, and Malchut. The 4th one, beauty, is that they barred themselves from speaking evil about one another. That's the Vav of God's name. And we'll see in a moment what that is. And finally, that they barred themselves from improper sexual conduct. That's related to the final Hey. And that's kingdom. So let's actually start from the bottom. Why is kingdom related to barring themselves or refraining from improper sexual conduct? So that's related to how one relates to the feminine. The feminine is the kingdom. Kingdom is always the feminine aspect of God's name. The what we call the divine presence. And the divine presence is what holds families together. So when there is proper sexual conduct, and sexual conduct doesn't only mean by the way, how the mother and father relate to one another. It's also how they actually relate to the children. And the reason for that is that when the procreative force is unchecked, it also comes out as impulsive behavior towards others, not just in sexual conduct. It also comes out in different ways. So when there's anger is related to improper sexual conduct, because the anger is like an expression of an inability to hold back one's internal energy, one's procreative energy. So that also relates to the children. But the idea here again is that the divine presence is what is found in a family, in an atmosphere of a home, where the relationship between the husband and wife is proper and correct. Then we said that they refrain from speaking evil about one another. The whole idea of the vav, of the beauty, is that all the different facets come together. Speaking evil of one another is, like we said with Joseph, not being able to recognize his brothers, and his brothers, Joseph was able to recognize his brothers, but his brothers were not able to recognize him. And we said that it starts and it initiates from a place of not being able to allow the other person space, not giving them their proper, not seeing that they have a role as well. And beauty is being able to put all the pieces together, seeing the full harmony that comes out of the many different facets. And so this is many times the issue between people that argue and then speak ill of one another and slander one another. It's because they can't really appreciate that the other person has just as much right to be in the world as I do. And it's not just that they have a right, it's more than that their particular contribution is needed. So even if I disagree with someone, even if I have a fight with someone, I don't come to slander, because slander is actually saying, well, this person doesn't have a right to be in the world. There's no room for this type of person here. And that's really what slander at its depth comes from. So we have to be very careful about that, to see that everything has a place, everything has a time, every person has a right to be here. And it's not just a right, but they contribute something. So even if we disagree, even if we fight, even if we're at odds, I don't come to slander them because I believe that they have a role to play in reality. And then the understanding here is, like we said, language, the left hemisphere of the brain. That's pretty straightforward. And finally, wisdom is that they did not change their names. There's a very important thing about names in the Talmud. There's a question that keeps coming up, whether names have meaning or not. This question comes up many times in the Talmud. Talmud is basically Shma Kagarim, is how they say it in Aramaic. Does the name have meaning? Does it cause something? Is it the reason behind the way that a person is? People who believe that names carry meaning, they carry essence, and that is Rabbi Meir in the Talmud, in the Mishnah. He's the one who always wants to study the meaning of a name to understand what's going on. So they feel that the essence of something is in its name. In other languages, it's not so clear that that's the case. That's why we're putting language here in understanding. But in wisdom, it's saying that if the language carries also inner meaning is not what they call the myth of the museum. There's something called the myth of the museum, which is that language is like sort of, you walk through a museum and you have all these artifacts showing, and at the bottom of each one it tells you what the name is, what the noun is. Most of the time these names are arbitrary. They don't carry a meaning. An exception in English would be names that are onomatopoeic, meaning that, like, crash, or strike maybe. These are names, words, that the sound of the word carries the meaning itself. But in Hebrew, the idea is that it's not just the sound of the word, but it's actually how the word is written. That's why we play all these games with gematria, with understanding the numerical value of words. Because we say that the names of these words carry the meaning behind them. The most famous one is nature is 86, the same value as God's name Elokim, saying that nature is the concealed version of godliness. That's what's being carried inside nature. So that's the idea of Shema Kagarim, that the name carries the cause, the essence of what this thing is. So we have here the full model of these 4 reasons. What's amazing is that all 4 reasons are actually alluded to in the first verse of the book of Exodus. It says, Ve'ele Shemot. These are the names of the children of Israel, or Jacob, children of Israel, coming to Egypt with Jacob, each man with his household. So let's look at these at this verse. Ve'ele Shemot, the meaning of these are the names. So you think this would be related to the names, but actually it's not. Ve'ele Shemot, when you do the gematria, you do the numerical value of Ve'ele Shemot, you get that it's equal to Shlom Bait, to peace in the home. So that's actually the 4th one. The 4th reason that we said that they kept proper sexual conduct, that they had peace at home. That's what kept them identified separately from the Egyptians. So that's in the first 2 words. And the reason that we don't say this is the names is because there's this superfluous word ve'ele, and these are. It should have just said ele, not and these are. Ve'ele is like something's going on here. When we say that, so there's a lot of teachings around it, and why did it say it that way, and so on and so forth. But the idea here is that we're taking the gematria, the numerical value, and we see that it's equal to the Shechina B'nehem, to the Shlom Bait, to the peace in the home. But then the next 2 words, Shemot B'nei Yisrael, the names of the children of Israel, so that's that they kept their names. Habayim Mitzrayma, there's a big question about this. Why does it say who are coming to Egypt? It should have said who came to Egypt, not who are coming to Egypt. Why are they coming now? It's a grammatical question that Rashi asks, not here, but we had a very similar verse in last week's parsha, actually in Vayigash 2 weeks ago, and there he asked this question: why does it say they're coming now? It should have said that came. Just the fact that this is a question about the grammar, the language, already hints that this is about that they retain their language. But there's another thing being alluded to here, is that when a person continues to speak their mother tongue in a foreign land, they continue to feel the freshness of having come just now. They don't fully assimilate because of that. Language is probably one of the most strongest things that keeps us connected back to our origins, back to our source. Et Yaakov, with Jacob. They were always coming with Jacob. Jacob is the archetypal soul of the sphere of beauty. And so this is why they didn't slander one another. In the same way that Joseph was able to hold back from being seduced by Potiphar's wife because he remembered his father Jacob. So here they were constantly with Jacob, remembering that they are all children of one father. And that kept them from slandering one another, of speaking ill to one another. And finally, Ishu veito ba'u, we have another allusion in the same order, each man with his house, with his household. And this, of course, alludes to their coming together with their wives and staying loyal and retaining the household and ensuring that the household would continue to exist even through the difficult exile that they had there. And these are keys, these are 4 keys to retaining our identity wherever we are and whatever we're faced with. It's this idea of, first of all, retaining my name, knowing my name. Sometimes we even tell someone, if you feel that your life is not working the way you want it to, you haven't been able to overcome some obstacles, you're maybe ill, there may be calamities, whatever it is. A lot of times we tell somebody, okay, so switch back to your Hebrew name. Use your full Hebrew name sometimes. And although Rav Ginsburg wasn't very much for this in the early years, Now we sort of caved in and even sometimes add a name or change the name. The sages say that Meshaneh Makom Meshaneh Mazal, when a person changes his whereabouts, where he lives, he changes his mazel, he changes his luck in life. But even better than that is changing the name. When a person's name changes, what they really meant by changing a name is changing reputation. It's changing the way that people see you. But all these things, they help you retain your identity, and so that you can face whatever adversity you have from around you that may be impinging on you and trying to make you erase who you are and taking away from your identity. So these are very important points to bring up all the time, to have them. There was a very interesting story that goes with this, that Reb Hillel of Parich, one of the great Hasidim, he once had this problem that people were he was being suspected of not being loyal to his wife, and so he came to the Mittler Rebbe, to the second Rebbe of Chabad. And remember, Reb Hillel was a tremendous sage, and he asked him, "What should I do? Why is this happening?" So he said to him, "It's very simple. You have to daven mincha. You have to pray the afternoon prayer with everyone else. You can't pray at home. You can't pray alone by yourself. Because when you are with everyone else, then there's no room for slander." It's like what we said before, that when people feel that you're part of the group, they feel that you have that you take up part of the landscape, the human landscape in their city, then they don't slander you. But when you're something distant and you're not connected, so slander begins. So all kinds of things begin to happen. So there's a lot of insight to take from this about different situations in life and how to solve them. Thanks for joining today, and I hope to see you tomorrow on the 1st of January of 2024.